This commenter asks, how do you keep your own cup full and not experience emotional fatigue or burnout? As a dog trainer, I struggle with cases like these and don't feel I could personally specialize. And this is such a great question. I specialize in dysregulated nervous systems and aggressive behavior. So I'm working with dogs with anxiety disorders, hyperarousal, trauma, experiencing chronic stress, hypoarousal, or who are displaying aggressive behaviors. And that can range from reactivity on leash to very serious bites and fights. And I know a lot of pet professionals who manage this emotional load in different ways. So some will do this type of work. They may specialize in this type of work, but they make sure to take on like a puppy case every now and then, or just something that really fills their cup and is can give them some big wins. I'll also see some folks who can do this work, but sort of draw a line around most of the work that they will take. And so they tend to only take on one case or two cases every now and then that is, let's say, more severe. My brain, I think, is a little bit different than some of these other brains. I'm ADHD and autistic and have DID, so a very complex trauma history. And I actually only really like working these types of cases. I lose interest very quickly in cases that are not like this. And for me, these cases are very cup-filling. Even when they end in the ways that we might not hope they're going to end, like with behavioral euthanasia, they are I find a lot of purpose in them. I am good at having those conversations with people. I am good at offering them the emotional support that they need in those situations, while also being very good at holding my own boundaries. I find a lot of purpose in supporting people in that way, and I find a lot of purpose in working with dogs who are having a very, very bad time, and who are often being misunderstood in that bad time to different degrees, or who are sometimes being very well understood and getting to collaborate with their humans in that understanding, and often still helping add a layer of nuance to the conversation. And so, as strange as it seems, these types of cases for me are cup filling. They fill me with a lot of purpose, which is not to say that there are not bad days or bad times or situations that end up draining my cup a bit. And now I think I'll talk a bit about how I protect against that and how I refill. And I think that this is probably good guidance regardless of how one is engaging with these cases. Whether you're someone like me who really prefers to work these types of cases through and through, or you're someone who works them, sometimes, or someone who works them a lot of the time, but makes sure to add in other cases that fill up their cup. So I think one of the things that is vitally important is recognizing the limitations that we have as pet professionals. I actually have very little control over the outcome of a case. And I think in a lot of dog training circles, the opposite is believed. And I think that becomes more and more true the more you move away from evidence-based practices. But I think that it is also very, very true in evidence-based practices where a lot of folks feel a great heavy responsibility. And that's hard. Not that we shouldn't feel responsibility, but we can't feel responsibility for the outcome because it has very little to do with us. And so if we are taking on the full responsibility for how the case turns out, when we have little to no agency around how the case turns out, we are setting ourselves up to feel like failures, especially in cases where the resolution is not like a nice tied up bow where we go, all right, the dog doesn't have anxiety anymore. Or in cases where there is a high rate, higher than in other areas and things ending in behavioral euthanasia. And so I don't carry that as a personal responsibility. I have a responsibility around my behavior, around the resources that I can offer. And I feel very, very confident and comfortable in where those lines are. And that is certainly something that I had to come to understand. It's not something that I understood out of the gate. But I can't control, for example, to a large degree, the resources that are available to my clients. I have ways that I can make my services more accessible. We have our mutual aid fund that can help people financially access other tools, and I can control the information that I can share and the way that I share it and adapting how I share it so that it can best hit with the person. But at the end of the day, I have no control over what the client does with that information. I have no control over the dog's health status. I have no control over largely the resources that are available to the humans. I am not living with the dog. And so I can both be very powerful and have a significant impact, a life-changing impact, which I find a lot of purpose in, but I also am not responsible for the outcome. I think another piece for me has been finding my clients. I'm very, very open about being queer, about being neurodivergent, about believing in human rights. And so I tend to attract my people. And if I somehow attract someone who, does not believe in human rights or who treats me poorly, I will not work with them. And I think a lot of times there is this pressure in the pet professional world to and in a lot of businesses, especially when folks are working for themselves, to take every case, to be every client's person. And that I think is a quick way to burn out. Not every client is going to be your client, and that is more than okay. And so I work with a lot of humans who refill my cup, even though the cases might be very, very hard. They tend to be very compassionate people, people who really want the best for their dogs. And that doesn't mean that they're not also experiencing anger and frustration and grief and really hard, complex, contradictory, conflicting emotions and feelings. It doesn't mean that they're always behaving in the way that I would behave. But as human beings, they tend to be really cut-filling, amazing people who I really enjoy working with. It is very, very uncommon for me to work with someone that I don't enjoy. And there's a lot of privilege there because I do own my own business. But again, I think it's really common, especially for business owners, especially in the beginning, to think that every client should be their client. I keep really good boundaries, and I keep my boundaries really flexible. So I take 2 days off a week. And for a long time, that was not the norm. Before COVID hit, I was getting ready to start taking 1 day off a week, and that was going to be this huge change. I take 2 days off a week. And here's the thing that I think sometimes I work on those days. Sometimes I do work on those days off because I kind of follow my dopamine. I follow my brain. And so if my brain feels like working on those days, sometimes I will. I don't book lessons ever, but I will sometimes do video replies. I'll work through my emails sometimes. And then sometimes I keep a hard line and I don't do any work on those days off. I also make sure that I'm doing lots of other things that fill up my cup. I am resting, different kinds of rest, sensory rest, emotional rest, social rest. I'm getting appropriate sleep. I'm eating regularly and in ways that nourish my body. I'm staying hydrated. I spend a lot of time in nature. For me, moving my body is essential to my well-being, and I make sure I get a lot of that. I have incredible social support. I have really good friends, really good community. I have a great professional network that I can lean on and lean into and collaborate and network with. As I mentioned, I have a complex trauma history. I've spent a lot of time in therapy. And through that work, I have learned to trust myself. I've learned really excellent boundary setting. And I do have really good self-regulatory skills. And this was not the case several years ago. Jumping back to where I was talking about not being responsible for the outcome of a case, the other side of that too is that I know how to celebrate the wins that are wins in these cases and to show my clients how to celebrate those wins. And the wins in behavior therapy feel and look different than they might in other types of cases. And so knowing how and when to find that joy and to celebrate it, I think is also really key, not only for my clients, but for myself. And so I don't think it's appropriate for everyone to take these types of cases all the time. I think we have to do what fills our own cup. And it's okay if working this type of caseload all the time isn't what fills yours.